Georgios Petropoulos is now going to present about quality, choice, and competition in two-sided platform markets. Georgios, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thanks to Jovi, Kari, Seb and Seth for the efficient organization of this. This is a joint work with Nestor Brown. He's researchers at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Basically, what do we try to do? Let me see if I, oops, okay, now I can. So we focus on two-sided markets where we have network externalities. Typical one side is consumers, the other side can be many things, advertisers, sub-developers, firms. And a point that there are great contributions in this line of literature that focus on prices. So how network externalities, how the degree of multi-homing between different platforms affect the pricing decision by firms, and also some specific market characteristics in the special context. So we take a step back earlier than that. And our research question that we ask here is what is the optimal choice of quality of service to each side of the market. I'm a platform, I want to attract sellers, I want to attract buyers, but I need to make also a key investment on quality on each side. The question is, what is the optimal choice I have made and how it depends on the different parameters like degree of multi-homing and network externalities. And the subsequent question we want to ask is whether this choice is socially efficient. So a social planner that wants to maximize total surplus would choose a quality that would be at the similar range, lower, higher, and those are the basic questions we have in mind. So what is the motivation of that? There has been a lot of discussion on the relationship between platforms and businesses that use these platforms to promote their products and services. There was an EU regulation that was put in place in July 2019, which tried to bring some transparency on the relationship between platforms and the suppliers, the sellers. They do that because by running a survey, business survey, they realize that sellers come forward with some particular complaints, and those complaints have to do with platforms and the environment they create for the seller. So typical examples are sudden and unilateral changes in terms and condition, delisting and suspension of accounts, issues with the ranking, discrimination favoring own services, access issues, possibilities to use data, price parity clauses that there was a separate line of debate and decisions related to that. So the survey pointed out on the seller side these particular complaints. The European Commission responded by bringing a regulation trying to put some clarity on the conditions that should be satisfied in the relationship between platform and business. What are the issues related to the EU regulation on platform and business? And the background survey in order to assess what are these relationships that motivated this regulation is a survey of 2,553 firms in 7 European countries, which carried out in the period November 2016, January 2017. And this survey, among the others, contains information about the number of sellers participating in different platforms in different countries, and also information about the problems they faced by these firms when dealing with the listed platforms of the survey. We have 49 platforms in the survey in 4 different categories. So we have the commerce category, which the big platforms are there. In total, we have 19 platforms. App stores like Google Play and Amazon apps, Apple. Social networks, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, among the others. And online advertising platforms, Yelp, AOL, Bing, and so on. I mean, the first key observation is that multi-homing is something that it is very much alive. So we see that if we look at the particular specific category of platform and see the multi-homing within this category, it's something that it is something that the majority of sellers do. They don't stack on a particular platform. And this degree becomes even higher if we consider all the platforms as a whole, so you don't consider categories. And this is an illustration that this degree becomes quite higher when you put on the same bunch both Facebook and both Bing, for example, which originally they belong to the different categories according to the data. So multi-homing is something that is very much alive on the seller side. So what we do here is we use this survey and the problems that they are reported, and we try to assess the quality of service of the platform. And at the same time, we want to use combine this with the other data, additional data, to do that also on the buyer side. So we have sellers, buyers, and we try to assess quality on both sides. And based on this information, we estimate how demand for buyers and sellers for a given platform depends on quality and network externalities. And then we try to see whether what is the optimal quality choice and whether it is socially efficient. So this is work in progress. So I will start presenting a very preliminary model, and then the underlying assumption so far is that sellers multi-home, but buyers do not multi-home, single home, which clearly is something that need to be adjusted. So we need to allow some multi-homing in the future for the buyer side. So the measure of quality on the seller side is basically we take the total number of firms that visit a platform in a given country, and we deduct the number of firms that declare that they have that face some problems dealing with this platform. So the higher this measure is, the platform there are less complaints about this platform, so we perceive that as higher quality of service to the sellers. What I'm doing here is so on the buyer side we use SimilarWeb, which is data on internet traffic and usage for the selected platforms, and collect data on the given time period that we have this business survey. And we play with a combination of unique visitors on a particular platform, the country rank based on traffic for this platform, and the average time spent on the website. Also the bounce rate, the percentage of people going there but only view the first page is relevant. So for this presentation, the measure will depend on the inverse of country rank, weighted with the average time spent and the unique visitor. So that give us a measure of quality on the buyer side, which the higher the quality is, the more benefits the buyers get. And a brief illustration of the model is that we have two sides, X side, which is the buyers, Y side, that it is the sellers. We have platforms A and B that compete. The consumers are uniformly distributed in the usual hoteling fashion in a line between 0 and 1. And the timing is the following. The new step is the first step, the stage 1, where platform choose the quality of service on each side of the market. And we consider a quadratic cost function, and I will come back to why we consider a quadratic cost function. Then at the second stage, platform choose prices, and then buyers and sellers decide which platform to visit. As I said, buyers single homes, so they choose either one or the other, while sellers have the ability to multi-home. So based on this, if we go to the graph, the consumers located between 0 and YB, they only visit platform A. From YB to Y, sorry, not the consumer, the sellers. We are in the sellers right now. The sellers that are located between 0 and YB are visiting only platform A. From YB to YA, they multi-home on both platforms, and from YA to 1, they go only to platform B.
Thanks. Georgios, to help us understand this a little better, there's a question from Ariel Scalita, and I have a related question, which is, so what is the definition of network externalities in this context? And just more generally, as we think about this, what's a kind of a product or a service that we should have in mind that would be, well described by your model?
So the network externalities in this model capturing by the number of sellers that give value and how this gives value to buyers. So it is how much I value the interaction with the other side of the market.
So it's not one-sided network effects, it's
no,
two-sided network effects.
It is two-sided network effects. Thanks for the question.
And give us an example of a product or service that you have in mind that would be well described by this.
Let's consider that we have two competing social networks. We could put Twitter and Facebook following the categories in the data. Facebook is at 0, Twitter as the 1. There is some heterogeneity of consumers on the preferences. So the consumers are, there are people that they are close to 0. They are very attached to their preferences to what Facebook offers. Some other people, they are more attached to what Twitter offers, so they are close to 1, but we have also the people that multi-home. And the question is how the platforms select qualities, which is the quality, in this case, I will treat my advertiser that will bring me, this is the seller side, will bring me some money, and then I need also to have good quality on the buyer side, which is consumes my content somehow, in order to attract. So it is a matter of what quality I will choose in both cases. And of course, when you are talking about prices, it may be optimal that the price on the one side is 0. So in this case, it could be that the buyers, the consumers of the content, let's say, and the potential buyers of the advertisers, when they match, they pay 0 price, as it happens in reality in the business models of these firms. So this is a basic example. We could also consider app developers that bring some value to the platform with apps, and we have also the buyers that consume the apps from the other side. We can think other kind of models with 2 search engines, Google and Bing. And then again, we have the buyers side that consume the content. Probably the optimal price is 0. And on the other side, we have the advertisers. Or we can consider Amazon Marketplace and eBay that potential buyers come in touch with the potential sellers. And there is a subscription fee as a pricing mechanism to generate some value for the platform out of that.
Okay.
So basically, the utility on the side of the buyers can give you, depends on the quality, on the side of the sellers by platform A, depends on the quality you offer to them. It depends on how close their preferences are to you. So this is captured by this Z parameter, which is in hoteling model is the transportation cost, but also the price are A, and also the network externalities of the other side. So X captures the number of consumers that they are there. So beta is the network externality parameter that adds value to the sellers that go to platform A from because this platform has on board a measure X of consumers. So in the similar way, we can define the utility for sellers in platform B. We have multi-homing. In the buyer side, we don't have multi-homing. We have single homing, and that gives us a different condition We use this condition to derive the demand for each of the platforms. And then in stage 2, we take the profit maximization to select optimally the prices given these demand functions. And we focus at the optimal solution at the parameters in which we have an interior equilibrium, prices are non-negative, and qualities are positive, quantities, demand is behaving well. The optimal solution then is Y, B, and A star, and X star. X star is the demand for the buyers, Y star for the sellers. So people up to X star, they go to platform A. Above X star, they go to platform B. And basically, based on these optimal demand functions, we estimate, we can derive the optimal utility of the two sides from stage 1, from stage 2, as a function of parameters, which is the quality of service and the network externality. Alpha is the value that the users, the consumers get from the sellers being in that platform, and beta is the value that the sellers get from consumers being in that platform. So what we do is we try to estimate what is the impact of quality and of the network externalities on each side of the market. And going to the buyer side, that we assume single homing, we adopt an asset logic model, which basically has 2 stages. In the first stage, I select which of the 4 categories of platforms I will go, and then which platform within the category I choose I will visit. We use BLP instruments to treat the endogeneity issues related to within Nest SER. And basically what we find is that quality has much greater impact in attracting buyers. So the dependent variable here is the probability to choose that platform as a function of quality and sellers. While the network externality alpha, it has also a positive effect, but it is much smaller from the quality effect, which seems to be the dominant. So we do the same exercise for sellers, but here we have multi-homing in the model. So basically, whatever any visit to the platform that give me positive utility is a good choice. So I visit that platform, and that removes also the interdependence between the attributes of different platforms. My decision to visit one platform just corresponds to the utility I get out of that. And again, we see that the quality at other different specifications and robustness checks has the primary role. So people, sellers tend to visit firstly, the platforms of higher quality, and secondary consideration is the number of buyers, the network externalities that we will find there. We use also, going to stage 1, we use also the information, the first order condition, to be able to derive the quality cost functions. Out of respect for the second speaker, I will skip this part because I'm about to reach the time allocated to me. So the idea is that we adopt a methodology on how to estimate the cost of quality function, and basically on the buyer side and on the seller side. And when we do that, we get something that, so the quality measure is normalized in both sides from 0 to 10, so that to be comparable. And then we estimate the cost function as quality increases. And we see that both curves more or less have a quadratic form. So that is the motivation of considering the quadratic function in the theoretical model. But we also see that the quality cost function is clearly different between buyers and seller. Of course, what we need to keep in mind is the different assumption over multi-homing between the two sides of the market. With sellers, we have data, we assess the multi-homing degree, so we impose multi-homing. An extension is to apply also multi-homing on the buyer side and see how this picture changes, because this is an important picture that determines the quality, the incentives of firms to invest in quality. So then theoretically, we are trying now to solve what is the optimal level of quality on stage 1, and also to compare it with the efficient quality choice, which is basically the quality that maximizes total surplus. And from the insights we have over the parameters, network effects, and cost parameters, we can also get an idea which side gets more quality. As a motivation to go further, what the last plots that I will show you refer to observed and efficient quality choice. So the observed is the one we observed in the data. After we normalize it to 0 between some degrees 0 and 10. So we see that the average number is relatively small. We compute empirically the efficient quality choice by maximizing total surplus. And we see that while in numbers, both in numbers, but also in difference between observed and efficient quality choice for the different categories of platforms, we see that sellers are the one that they experience less quality with respect to what would have been the efficient outcome. While in buyers, there are still less quality on average, but in specific categories like app stores, social media, we see more quality than the efficient outcome given to the buyers. And
thanks, Georgios. I only have a minute or two left. Can you flesh out a little bit more exactly how you're measuring quality?
Yes. Basically, I'm done with the results. So what we will do is develop further theoretical model and examine multi-homing in both sides with some results. So let me go back on how to measure quality, and that is my last point. So on the seller side, we have the complaints. What we do is we take the number of firms that visit a particular platform in a particular country, and we deduct the number of firms that declare that they have issues, problems with that particular platform. And that gives us a sense of what the quality is. And we normalize that between 0 and 10 to have a comparable scale. And then on the buyer side, we play still with the combination. So an additional issue is to robustness check on the quality measures. So we have data on unique visitors, we have the country rank, we have the average time spent on the website. And basically what we did is for this quality I presented here, it is the inverse of the country rank, weighted on the average time spent on the platform and the unique visitor. So it's there are those two different dimensions for defining quality. And then it's scaled from 0 to 10 to have comparative, to facilitate comparison. So that is the story so far and the future plan.
Thank you, Georgios. Why don't we have Yo set up, and then I have, if there's anyone else who wants to send a question, I have a couple questions. So one question we had was, is there a paper or place where people can read more about this yet? I think.
The paper is under development. The data has been used to derive an impact assessment on assessing the quality, and at the same time, my co-author has already shared this data. So I will be happy some results on this data in an earlier publication. So I will be happy to provide the link.
If yeah, so how will we get how can we share the link? Is there, should we go to your website or go to IDE? I can
post it now at chat.
Okay, so you post it on chat, that's awesome. And people can get it there. And there's one more quick question, and then we'll go to Yo, which is, so one of your results was the equilibrium probability was different from the socially efficient outcome. Can you give some intuition why that might be the case, or why that is the case?
This is something under development, but what is very crucial for that is the quality cost function. And what we found is that especially for sellers, providing higher quality is costly. That is what the results show us so far. So going back to theory, in a model that we have multi-homing only on one side, then the competitive bottleneck a la Armstrong can apply, which is like I get the single homing side to me, so I offer more quality to buyers because they single home, and then I have monopoly power over the sellers because I keep the buyers with me. The sellers will want to come to my place, and I have a competitive advantage over my competitors. Although whether this will be the case if both sides multi-home, this is unclear. And this is
so just to back up. So what you're saying is a monopolist will undersupply quality, and that's what's going on? Exactly.
It uses the market power in the single homing side to undersupply quality.
So they're optimal. They maximize profits by undersupplying a bit of quality that's costly, and then they can make more profits. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Interesting. Okay. Well, great. Well, please do share that link. I don't see it yet, but so please post that up. And we have two presentations as promised. Next up is Shavit, who's going to speak about transparent machine learning incentives and opportunities. And again, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, or I see some of you doing in the chat. Joe, take it away.
All right, thanks, Eric. And thank you for the whole IDE group for setting up this seminar. So I'm Shavit. I'm a PhD student at Harvard in computer science. I'm going to be talking today about the interesting ways that gaming can actually have unexpected effects. Gaming of algorithmic systems can have unexpected effects on both accuracy and population performance and other things. Just to give you guys some context, if you haven't seen a theoretical computer science talk before, we're going to be talking about things kind of at a high level and describing sort of stylized models. These aren't really expected to sort of withstand particular detailed criticism, but what I really would love is if while you're listening to this talk, you help me think about the kind of econometric tools and experiments that could be run to observe some of these phenomena. So, and this work was done with Brian Axelrod and Ben Edelman, and it's currently under review at ICML. All right, so there's an inherent benefit that comes from transparency in terms of the agency that it provides to individuals subject to decisions. I pulled this up from my Bank of America account. The credit raters are legally required to provide adverse action notices to explain to me how I can improve my credit rating. I won't tell you what my credit score is, but it is improving. So this is an inherent good, and it empowers me to improve my own lot in life. But there's a reason, there are several reasons that this often does not happen, and systems are not made transparent. And the most common one is gaming. The potential that people will manipulate their features in order to get an outcome, a decision that they want. If you can use the hand raising functionality in Zoom, can you raise your hand if you know what this thing is used for? I know that at least someone
raise your hand feature.
Yeah, or you can raise your hand in person. I'll trust that you are doing that. I know at least one knows it because I saw them retweet it. So this is a phone holder to simulate taking lots and lots of steps because there are a number of health insurance related programs that will basically give you better premiums if you take more steps during the day. And this is goes to show you that people will really quite intentionally game their features if it stands to benefit them, which makes lots of sense. In a more serious note, Camacho and Conover in 2011 demonstrated that for a poverty benefits allocation program in Colombia, that basically this program has some sort of method of scoring a family's poverty, And they have and the country had a threshold for where they would allocate the poverty benefits. And in late 1997, they revealed this information to the low-level administrators who are both elected by representatives, by individuals, and in charge of administrating this collection. And you see very quickly that that the distributions shift to sort of like be slightly below the threshold until the point where in 2003, where it's really pretty much everyone is able to get these benefits. And that's not to say that people should not be getting benefits. They should almost certainly be getting more than they sort of were technically allotted. But there are sort of real risks that you start giving benefits to people who do not need them as much as those who do, and that the program loses political legitimacy as a result. And so there are real consequences to these sort of gamings of systems, and it makes a lot of sense why they aren't made transparent. And so if we want to formalize the problem with gaming briefly, we can think of the sort of standard, we can think of an example setting, which is for telco data used to construct credit ratings. There are a number of emerging markets where this is being done, where you have some sort of phone usage data, like the calls that you make and the frequency of calls and the texts and so on, as well as sort of financial data associated with your phone account. And you, as a lender, want to know the probability that someone will repay a loan that you give them. And so you're going to use the phone usage data that you have in order to, along with a predictive model, to estimate a repayment probability, which will define the loan rate that you give. Now, the problem that gaming exposes, we're going to formalize this in terms of, so you have some feature vector X. There is a subset of visual features. V is just a projection matrix to reduce to those visible features. The label is sort of assumed to be a function of things that you don't see, but that are correlated with your hidden features. And the prediction is made as a function of the visible features. H of Vx. F is the label generating function, and H is the decision making function.
When you say visible to whom?
To the decision maker.
Okay.
To the person making loans.
Gotcha. And the person who potentially can game it knows all of the features and can.
The person who can potentially game it doesn't necessarily know all of the features.
Okay.
They don't need to. The only features that they really care about are the ones that are
the visible ones.
Right, exactly, because they'll determine their decision.
Okay.
All right. So the problem that gaming introduces here is that it adds this additional arrow where the predictive model will actually influence the visible features because people will manipulate their visible features in order to improve their decision. And thus you have this prospect that the label and the prediction will sort of like part ways and will no longer be reflective of each other. And this is the sort of the fear of this is the problem that we've seen emerge in some of these previous situations. And the point of this talk is really that I want to expand the way that you think about gaming. That one can view gaming as exclusively deception, but another way of understanding gaming in certain situations is that people are responding to the actual decision-making logic of your function and changing their behavior in such a way that ends up changing their labels. And so if you want to understand that within this diagram, we're now saying that the entire feature vector is a function of the model, that the actions that people take affect both their hidden and visible features, and also possibly that the visible features are like actually directly affect the label generating function on our input to. And so the rest of this talk is going to be understanding the consequences of this observation because they are quite profound. So the important thing here is that there's actually real value just to individuals being able to, just to decision makers being able to incentivize individuals to change their labels in certain ways. For example, creditors, in addition to wanting to make accurate credit ratings, want borrowers who are more creditworthy. Colleges in the United States frequently incentivize volunteer or just make decisions based on volunteering. And a reasonable assumption is that the reason that they do this is because volunteering actually makes their applicant pool sort of more responsible and more mature and will make them better students. You can think there are many settings in which recommendation systems, like for example, YouTube would really like it if, in addition to correctly stratifying which videos are better and worse, that they would actually incentivize people to produce better videos and produce better content. The real question becomes, how do you find these decision-making functions which will incentivize people to improve their behavior? So one quick note, there is actually a trade-off in certain situations between accuracy and this sort of performance of your population as far as their labels go. So an example is in the telco situation. Imagine that what the decision-making function takes into account the number of people who call you each week. And let's say that initially it's not particularly correlated with your likelihood of repaying a loan. And the one action that you can take is you can make friends, and then your friends will call you. Initially, a decision-making function, a decision-making model, which wants to maximize the creditworthiness, will explicitly reward people who increase this feature, because it will implicitly make them build relationships, which and let's say that relationship building actually does cause you to have relationship building skills causes you to have better likelihood for paying. So great, you've improved the performance of the population. Unfortunately, as decision makers can't see this, and so all you've done is you've kind of made it harder to determine who does and who is and is not actually creditworthy. And specifically, you have to reward people in some way, and so you are giving loans to people who you can't tell whether they get lots of calls because that was where they started, or whether they're getting lots of calls because they've actually changed their creditworthiness, and therefore they're more creditworthy. Yeah, and so the most accurate model would actually be don't reward the number of people who you call at all. So people have shown that recently, John Miller et al. At Berkeley have shown that the problem of identifying a decision-making function that is sort of causally, sorry, not causally. I was warned not to say causally in an economics seminar. A decision-making function that creates improvement in the population is as hard as sort of causal, modeling the causal graph. By the way, I think I see that people are chatting. I just want to make sure you know that I'm not seeing those show up as questions, just in case that's a thing that you were hoping for. So please use the other service. So what can we do? Well, that's the point of this paper. And the idea is basically that conveniently, we can actually implement certain decision models and watch people respond and watch the resulting, the changes to the label that they have, basically run experiments. So if you see that manipulating a feature doesn't change the label, you can sort of know that that feature isn't going to be useful. If it does change the label, you can hold on to it. And not only this, but in general, when people game a decision model, they're by definition exploring the regions of the model in which you might be inaccurate. And so if you retrain based on that data, you'll actually over time just make up for a lot of the problems that are introduced by people gaming. And similarly, if your goal is to sort of be able to generalize to if I deployed a new decision model, how would people respond? That's exactly, you can also learn a model for how individuals game. So that was kind of maybe a little high level. Let's see an example, right? So imagine that our creditor has these two features that they're using. The number of people who the number of people you text every week, and the number of people you call every week. And let's say that our initial data distribution it basically says that these are kind of correlated, and that when they are both sort of large, people happen to be more creditworthy, and when they're both small, people are not creditworthy. So now we're going to do an experiment. We're going to deploy a decision model that exclusively looks at the number of people you text. So this is going to incentivize people to text more, and we're going to be transparent about this. That's important, right? We're going to tell everyone that this is how we're doing this. And so we're going to see that people text more, and lo and behold, we get a shift in the distribution. We observe the shift in the distribution, and we see that actually it doesn't matter at all. People, anyone can text lots and lots of people. It doesn't actually lead to any sort of change in their likelihood for payment. Then you run a different experiment, and you ask, okay, what if we reward the number of people you call every week? and we observe a distribution shift, and it turns out that people are actually much more likely to repay. Maybe the argument here is that like when you call people, you actually have to talk with them on the phone for a while, and that forces you to build relationships, and building relationships is somehow correlated with likelihood of repayment because it makes you a more responsible person. Not only is this useful to know, but actually this phenomenon will continue to be true even under like people continuously gaming. Like you will just reinforce your confidence in a certain decision-making model. Another thing to observe here is that in addition to—
on that last point, I mean, is it possible that the first set of people who do it, maybe it's correlated with their creditworthiness, and then the later people don't, or for that matter, vice versa? I mean, you could imagine that there's different costs or something to taking some of these actions.
Yeah, so we definitely factor in costs in the model that I'll describe later. But do you mean sort of that the label generating function varies over time, or are you saying something different?
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. Well, so yeah, I mean, I think this is very interesting, and it's useful. I could see how some types of actions, as you point out, really don't change the labels, and other kinds of actions really do change them. But then you went further and said that this would continue to be true over time, and I guess I could imagine situations where it's true initially and then it stops being true, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's a great point. An implicit assumption of this model is that we are talking about sort of phenomenon that remain true over time. We will incorporate sort of in our formulation the ability. You can imagine that there are actions that have such a high cost that sort of only certain subsets of people can take them, but over time, sort of like more and more people are able to take them, and therefore, as the distribution of actions that people take shifts, what was previously a gray gaming proof model ceases to be a gaming proof
model. Initially, you have to make a real phone call, and then someone develops a little app that makes phone calls for you, and now it's no longer a good signal.
Yeah. And so I think that there's definitely like interesting work to be done in terms of when can you decide that you have like actually figured out that a function is going to be that a model is going to be stable under gaming over time. Seth asks that like couldn't this basically turn into like a signaling mechanism, and so yes, this like one consequence of this is that you like gaming can lead to signaling. In some settings that's like fine, right? You're just happy with people's ability to signal. I guess that I would say that there are some settings in which it's not signaling, and there are some settings in which it is, and it's not inherently bad if it is signaling, but we're mostly not going to talk about that. I hope that's a satisfying answer. I want to follow up if it's not.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay. Great. So another thing to note here is that initially we could have used an incorrect model, right? Like if we had no gaming, we would have gathered less data, and therefore our actual model would have been less correct. And so in some sense, having people game has actually given us sort of additional, has explored additional regions of the state space, and that's potentially made our model actually more accurate than it otherwise would have been. Now let's instantiate like a specific example and work through the math of it. So now we're going to have our model be linear. The model is going to be like some omega times our features, i.e. like we reward each feature by a certain weighting. And our label is going to be some linear model of all of the features, not just of the visible features. And we're going to come up with some, and basically the way that individuals are going to game, the way that they're going to factor in decision making is going to be through some action, some action vector, and then M is a matrix that defines the way that each action affects the different features. So the M matrix here is obviously very important. We're actually going to assume that we don't know M a priori, so we're not going to assume that we know the actions that people have access to. Note that there are a few things about M. M can definitely be not full rank. So what that would mean is that potentially, if you imagine that to get more calls, you need to make more friends, and to make more friends, you have to be on social media. And so the making more friends action perturbs both you're more on social media and you're more and you have more calls. And there's no way of independently perturbing those dimensions. And in general, actions can affect both hidden and visible features. And we can only really tell the visible features that an action is affecting. Okay, so there are a few different objectives that we can formalize for what we want here. Improvement is basically going to be that we want an expectation over the population that people responding to our decision-making model, which is parameterized by the vector omega, are going to sort of, on average, like maximize the labels that they receive. Alternatively, we could aim for accuracy, like mean squared error. The last thing that we can do is we can hope to actually recover the original parameters of the true model. For the accuracy and the sort of true model recovery, our paper goes much more into depth on like algorithms for actually doing this. I'm going to focus mostly on how do we get people to maximize performance. If we sort of want to take a look at the way that agents will actually respond, we're going to make an assumption, and our assumption is going to be that agents have quadratic action costs. So an agent is trying to maximize their utility, where their utility is defined as the decision they receive minus the action cost squared in some sense. And so you can work out the math of like exactly what response this leads to. And the answer is that it basically leads to a response that is linear in your choice of action is in some sense linear in the decision-making model that you are subject to. And so now we're going to see what the consequences of this are. So if our goal is to find the decision-making model that maximizes the sort of average label response, we can plug in our formula for the way that people are going to respond to a decision-making model, and we get this like kind of hairy thing, which is that it's a function of the omega star, which is the true parameters, times m transpose v, which is actually it's like a matrix which corresponds roughly to the relationship between how much you reward a feature in your model to how much that feature will affect your sort of true the actual change in features that your individuals will generate. And we're going and basically we can say explicitly that the optimal thing here is to respond maximally to make decisions that are going to maximize people's response, and like due to the way that like L2 works, that it turns into this equation. Now that's great. We've figured out what the decision model that we should use is. Unfortunately, we don't know M and we don't know omega star. And so we're kind of, in some sense, out of luck because this quantity is opaque to us. Now, very conveniently, you can actually figure this out directly from samples. By the way, I've dropped the expectations here. In our paper, we have lots of expectations and lots of noise and stuff, and the procedure works independent of all of those things. We're going to, for convenience, call the matrix M transpose V G. Now, the procedure is basically going to be what I visualized to you before, which is that if you simply incentivize people to, if you simply deploy initially a decision model that like does not incentivize people to do anything, and you just observe their base distribution, and then you deploy a sequence of decision models, each of which independently incentivize people to move in various directions, then you can observe information that you'll need. Dan asks whether omega star is a causal estimand. Yes, the causal inference is absolutely related to this procedure, and I'm going to hesitate to give specifics on that, but there's absolutely more in the paper, and actually there are a couple of other papers that explicitly argue about the connection here between an understanding of like the causal model. In my case, it would be probably like a linear structural equation model, and so I'm happy to talk about that more offline. So the way that we're going to use these features are basically, we're going to observe the response on average of individuals to each of these decision models that are deployed, and we're going to get the sort of the excess reward associated with each incentivized model, and very conveniently you can actually just take a weighted sum of these results that you get, and you are able to directly estimate each of the parameters of your sort of optimal omega for the purposes of incentivizing.
So Yo, we just have like a minute or two left. Just wanted to give you
yeah. So I'm almost done. So the great thing here that we've done is for our particular stylized model, we found a way to choose omega to maximize people's performance without having any idea what actions they have access to. Even by the way, we haven't even like known what the dimensionality of their hidden feature space is, or what the true decision-making function is. And that's basically the point here is that there's real potential for being able to explicitly model the benefits that decision makers can receive from gaming. And those benefits are not just remaining accurate or even becoming more accurate, as we described a little bit before, but they're potentially changing the distribution of individuals to gain substantially more institutional utility than what we previously had access to. And the really promising thing, to my mind, about this is that if decision makers realize this, if, for example, tech platforms realize their incentive to be transparent, there's they will potentially explicitly make themselves transparent and even go out of their way to inform individuals about the ways they can game, with the purpose being first to get better data, and then eventually to actually get better users and individuals subject to decisions. This is the paper. I would really appreciate any feedback that you have, and I'm excited to see where this research direction goes. Thank you.
Great, and let's also put that link into the chat so people can grab it that way too. That's great. Thanks very much, Joe. Quick question: can you relate this a little bit to some of the literature on price discrimination and/or principal agent models, where, like in signaling models that like Spence and others have done, there's an incentive to well, the agent can reveal their information by taking some costly actions. And in some cases, like with second-degree price discrimination, you end up benefiting both parties by having them take those actions.
Yeah, I think this is very related. I think that the main difference here is that we're talking about like an extremely high-dimensional model, and and we're talking about this potentially happening within the context of like machine learning models, right? So there are various other works that suggest that this might just happen naturally, simply by like repeatedly retraining a model. This might just be a thing that occurs as long as you have transparency.
Right.
So I think
just to be clear, I think I'm understanding is that there are situations where it's beneficial for the agent to take these actions, but there's also situations where it's not beneficial, right? And the part of what the model can illustrate is that with these experiments you can reveal which is which.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a real sort of short-term cost associated with to agents potentially with changing their labels in a way that is not beneficial to them. And crucial in the contract that we're discussing here is that agents are able to understand that agents really don't care about their about the labels that they receive, and really only care about the decision that they will receive from the decision maker. And so they're happy to sort of like perturb themselves in a way that might worsen their label, so long as they receive that benefit that they were sort of deliberately asked for.
Great. Well, regret we're out of time. We're a little over time. Thanks very much, Yo. Also, thanks, Georgios. That was really interesting stuff, and appreciate everyone joining and participating. That's right. Daniel Freund is going to speak next week, April 8th. So please join us then. Thanks very much, everyone.